Hello and welcome once again to On the Go with the Glenn Advantage team. I'm your host, Marcia Glenn. Today we are talking to Penfield Council member Kevin Berry. Thank you very much for joining us today. Who is running for Penfield Town Supervisor in the November election. Really key election. The Monroe County Democrats and the Penfield Democratic Committees have both formally endorsed him, and Berry is running against Republican Jeffrey Leanhouse, the current town supervisor. So thanks for spending time with us today. If you wouldn't mind telling the folks a little bit about yourself and a little bit of background.
Okay, thank you, Marcia. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me
thank you.
today. So as Marcia said, I am on the town board. I've been on the town board since January of 2024. I am the liaison to the Historic Preservation Committee, to the Energy and Environmental Conservation Committee, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Dayton Corner Schoolhouse. I'm also the chairman of the Public Safety Committee. As I said, I've been serving for a year and a half. I guess I want to tell you a little bit about how I got here. So I actually am a North Country boy. I grew up south of Watertown. And probably the defining time of my life was when I was in high school. And my dad passed away, and my mom had passed away a couple of years before. So I was in high school and without parents. And that really made a difference in my life because I learned the importance of self-sufficiency. And basically my life story and my career since then have been all about self-sufficiency. Now I serve people with developmental disabilities, helping them to get jobs, that kind of thing. I went to college. I got a bachelor's degree in political science. Later on, I got a master's in communication. When I was 38, I wanted to have kids. And going back to what had happened to me, I decided to adopt two sons through the system. So now I have two sons. I have three granddaughters. My 9-year-old granddaughter is probably my most integral campaign staff. She goes with me campaigning all the time. And the other night at dinner, she was talking about when she is president, what she's going to do. So
Look for
it's having quite an effect on her. So, career-wise, I started at Heritage Christian Services in 1989, actually in Penfield on one of their first houses on 5 Mile Line Road. And I worked there. Then I worked for CDS Monarch. Then for 6 years, I moved to Arizona, and there I ran a career center where I really got into helping people with barriers to employment get employment. I mean, I branched out to veterans, to persons who had prior convictions, that kind of thing, and really became expert in that area. Then I came back to New York, and I've been for 13 years at the Arc of Wayne, and I'm the vice president of operations there, and I oversee their employment programs, their day programs, and a variety of other areas of the agency. So
when do you rest?
right now during campaign season, not much at all. And I'll tell you that I wound up running for the town board for two reasons. One was I was watching what was or was not happening with the Clark House, and that really affected me. And then it was 2023, and it was looking like the Democrats were going to let the Republicans once again go unopposed. And I was like, we need some variety here. We need some choices. So I decided to run, and then the ticket kind of formed from there. So
That's excellent. Tell us about the ticket itself.
Our current ticket?
Really?
Yes. So we have a great ticket this year. Basically, there's myself, and then there are two candidates for town council. One is John Getz, who's a pretty well-known attorney in Penfield, and the other is Bill Lang, who not only lives in Penfield and has lived there all his life, but he works for the town of Irondequoit in planning. He's the head of planning for the town of Irondequoit. So, that's a pretty valuable asset to have on the ticket. So
Nice, strong. So coming from Watertown, that was so interesting too, because when I first spoke with you, I think initially we got onto the subject of where did we come from.
Uh-huh.
My whole family came from Watertown initially. So it's not usually the case that you end up meeting someone else who's from Watertown, North Country,
Exactly.
and has now ended up coming into Penfield and residing here.
That's true.
So I am a lifelong, born and bred, true native girl. I started in Penfield, born and bred in Penfield. I live in Penfield. All my children are in Penfield. My grandchildren went through Penfield schools. So Penfield itself is really near and dear to my heart.
Uh-huh.
And based on the time period that I have seen within Penfield, the growth that has been established throughout the years and the directions that Penfield itself has gone in, I think are really important to be able to know where does Penfield go from here and why should people end up being very involved and very conscious of each and every one of the points that come up in Penfield and how it relates to them. So I'd like to read a quote, if I could, and if you can unpack it for me, for our audience. I'm running for supervisor. This is your quote.
Yeah.
I'm running for supervisor because I believe Penfield deserves leadership that listens to all residents and works collaboratively to address our community's needs and aspirations. So tell us where that quote comes from and what was the feeling for putting that down?
Okay. So both in the 2023 campaign and in this campaign, we hear time and time again that residents do not feel heard. That they don't feel that they're included in decisions, that decisions are made completely without them, without their knowledge, that kind of thing. And maybe some residents are listened to, but not all, and some feel they're just not given the opportunity. So I really want to make sure that the residents are listened to and that they're heard and things are not done behind closed doors and that people are not finding out about very important projects after the decisions have been made, which is often the case, that kind of thing. I'm all about forming relationships with residents. When issues have come up in different areas of town, I make a point of going out there, talking to people, listening to them, that kind of thing. And I think that's the approach that people really want. And also, when I take office, I'll have the advantage of having the ability to collaborate with a lot of our leaders, like Jen Lunsford, Samra Brook, Jill Morelli, all of them, and that's important to be able to have those relationships. It's all about getting things done. I'm not a big believer that party matters. I think that the results matter, and the results, to be correct, start with listening to the residents.
So based on that, what are you hearing from the residents throughout your campaign so far? Besides just maybe not being heard or listened to or becoming part of the process of making the decisions, what are their kind of key issues that are concerning them in Penfield at this point?
Well, having listened to the residents, their key issues are the primary aspects of our platform. And, one big one is development. That development be smart, that it be well thought out, that it be for the benefit of the people who live in Penfield, who work in Penfield, those kinds of things. That's really important. The other one is public safety in regard to road and pedestrian safety. There's a lot of areas in town that are really concerning. We had a campaign event the other day, and there literally was a car accident in front of the outdoor event.
Oh, wow.
So, areas that are of particular concern are the intersection of 441 and 250, 441 itself and the speeding that occurs there, Empire Boulevard, people are very well aware of that. Atlantic Avenue, that's an area that's of concern, and there was just a very tragic, fatal accident on Atlantic recently. So, those are things that are really of concern to the residents. So we have incorporated those into our platform.
Nice. I do know in growing up in Penfield, never really being able to grasp the idea in terms of why this 4-lane highway was put through the center of what was supposed to be our town.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that I understand in terms of what do we do with that? How do we end up protecting people and all the traffic that is still ending up taking place, going from west further east, is coming straight through our streets, which does do an immediate impact on the residents who live there.
Yep.
They have to deal with that
Yep.
on a daily basis. So I can see that as being a concern.
Yeah, it is a concern. And it was definitely one of the defining moments of Penfield when 441 went through as a 4-lane road. And that there are things that we can potentially look at for that long term. One of the things I want to do is be a visionary, and maybe there are things that we can do to mitigate that some. Maybe there are some traffic calming things. One person brought up, what if, the storefronts were facing the back and it was more of a commons kind of thing? Who knows? But there are ways to look at that and try to mitigate that some. And I think long term, we really need to do that.
So understanding that you are indeed hearing those concerns and taking those in and looking for ways to be able to address them.
Absolutely.
That's important.
Yeah.
So your platform has 3 critical elements: governmental accountability and accessibility, commitment to development that preserves the town's character and strengthens the community, and prioritizing safe streets and well-maintained infrastructure, which we just spoke to. Can you tell us more about each one of those on a kind of a complete breakdown? I know we spoke a little bit about it so far, but
Yep.
more of a breakdown per each one?
Yep, absolutely. So when it comes to government and the approach to government, the supervisor, as I said, needs to listen. They need to be open. They need to be open to new ideas. They need to ensure that there is communication, which is proactive with the residents, and that the residents feel that I, as the supervisor, am present for them. I think that's really important. When it comes to development, I am pro development. If we do not develop, then we will fall behind, but we need to do it in a smart way. And an example of that was the recent controversy over Costco. I personally would love to see a Costco in Penfield. I just did not feel that the corner of 250 and Sweets Corners Road was the appropriate place to put it. And that goes to one of our issues that we have is infrastructure. We need to make sure that the sewer system and the electrical grid can support what we want to put in. That's very important. And, that kind of goes into the whole idea of generational and workforce housing and how we kind of incorporate that more into Penfield. We need to have the infrastructure for that. So that's really important. Development, I am pro business. I'm especially small local business. Sometimes people tend to think that the Democrats are not the party of development or business, but that's what helps communities thrive, and it's very important. We just need to be smart about the way we do it. And then when it comes to the road and pedestrian safety, a big part of that is looking beyond the town. Yes, the supervisor can have more of an effect on the town roads that are maintained by the town, but also those relationships with county officials, with state officials, with the sheriff's department, those kind of things, so that even though we do not maintain or police the state or county roads, we need to have influence over what's going on in our town, regardless of what types of roads there are. We also need to look at the pedestrian walkways, things like that, to make sure that they're safer and can be used. And right now, Penfield is working on an active transportation plan, and those types of crosswalks and different things like that are part of what is going to be in that plan.
Nice. So tell us about your governing approach. How is that going to be different from the current administrations?
Okay.
and why you are indeed the right candidate for the Penfield Town Supervisor's job.
Okay. So, as far as approach, I will respect the residents, I will respect the town board, and I'll respect the process. As I said, the residents need to be listened to. They and the supervisor needs to be accessible, fair, all those kinds of things. That is true of the town board too. There's been too many times when the town board has made a decision with the supervisor included, and then a day or a week later, all of a sudden it's not being implemented because the supervisor has decided that he does not want to do it.
Hmm.
And the New York state law does not give the supervisor veto power over the town
Right.
board. So the town board in my administration will be respected. Its decisions will be respected. Even if it's a mixed party board, I don't care. It's not about the politics. It's about respecting the voters. If the voters put the people in, then the supervisor needs to respect them for being in those town board positions and treat them well. There should be a lot of communication with the town board, which there's not. There should be weekly updates on important things. If something pops up that's important, the town board should be immediately notified and not finding out later through a resident, but having the supervisor inform them, consult with them. That is very important as well. And that's respect for the process as well. I think that a lot of the issues that the town has regarding lack of trust in the government and that kind of thing comes from when the board or the process are not respected. So that would be a huge part of what needs to happen. The other thing is that the town really needs to have visionary leadership. What do the residents want? What do the residents need? What does the future of Penfield look like? Collaboratively, let's look at it and have a plan. Penfield is the town of planned progress. And some people say, well, that's really kind of just a joke now. That's what a lot of people say. But it really does need to be the town of planned progress, and the planning needs to come from the residents, be led by the supervisor, incorporate the town board, and be very strategic about where we're going. And what do we want to have in Penfield? What new ideas are there? What direction are we going in? And, the collective brain of the town is the genius behind the town. It really needs to be tapped. And so people need to know that what's going on, and they need to be given the opportunity to give their input. And I think that's one of the most important things. As far as me being the right candidate, I've been in government for a whole year and a half now, so I'm kind of a newbie, so a fresh face in government. But I've been in leadership for 35 years, different types of administration, that kind of thing. I'm a creative person. I care about people. I think that those things are very important in a leader. I want to be inclusive of all residents. I will make sure that, older people, that people with disabilities, the people who may not be as well represented are taken into consideration. I think that the staff of the town are great. They need to be listened to. They need to feel that they're included. They need to feel respected. And we also need to look at new residences and businesses. How do we bring those people into the town also, and show respect for them? I'm not motivated by myself or by politics. I am completely motivated by doing what's right for the residents of Penfield. And that's what's most important. So, that's why I think that really makes me the best candidate. So,
Nice explanation. So in the video of the 2024 Economic Review to the Business Chamber, Supervisor Leanhouse mentions that public feedback is always welcome but tends to be limited to a few in number. I think you kind of went through just that dissertation there in terms of how you are looking to be able to actually bring the voices of the full community in, and that it is not just top down, it is indeed the entire community pushing up to be able to have everything work out in the favor of the entire community
Yeah.
and not just based on one thought process of what you think should be taking place. Is that kind of correct or
Yeah.
summary of?
Yeah, that's correct. And when it comes to that statement, suppose that I am having a party and I could tell you, you're welcome to the party. Like we say, you're welcome to give your input.
Mhm.
So I could say, you're welcome to the party. I could say, you're invited to the party, or I could seek you out to come to the party. I want to have the administration that seeks people out to come to the party, where there's more communication about this is happening. We want to hear what you're saying, that kind of thing. I think that the folks who are doing the active transportation plan right now
Mhm.
are doing that a lot more than it has been done for other things sometimes in the past, where they're really pushing to get people to participate in that active transportation plan. That needs to be across the board so that we get the input of the residents. I want to have town halls when I am the supervisor. I want to have coffee with the supervisor events, different things like that. And there are certain projects that happen where the town is legally mandated to, for example, send out postcards to everyone within a certain range of the project. Don't just stop there. Do more. Make people more aware because, some people say, well, I never got a postcard. Or, yeah, it was supposed to go to everybody within a certain distance. Well, I'm 500 feet beyond that, so I had no idea about it. So to be proactive and open and inviting, I think that's crucial.
I think that's an excellent point. So what else is it that our folks have not heard about you? Is there any other background that you feel as though you'd like to share with our audience today? Anything else that I have not necessarily probed for at this point?
No, not really. I think that I pretty much covered my background. As I said, I have extensive experience in administration and leadership, which I think will be helpful in the town. My priorities are basically, my family and then contributing to society. And that's pretty much who I am. So,
Makes for a very good person. So as you come to the end of our time together, you've laid out kind of your hopes and aspirations for Penfield, and the election is November 4th.
Yes, and we really need people to come out and get the word out that there is indeed an election. I mean, this is like an off year election, and a lot of people are not aware, and people need to be aware of this election because on a town level, it's critical. I mean, this is going to decide the supervisor and 2 of the 4 council member seats.
So how is that messaging getting out?
Our campaign is really pushing to get it out. We are trying every way we can possibly think of to get the word out. We put the date of the election on our signs so that people will know that. We have candidates and volunteers going door to door all over town to let people know about the election and about our candidacy, about our campaign, those kinds of things. We're going to be doing those mailers that people just love to get, but please look at them. They're important and they have important information on them.
They are important. So we'd like to thank you, Councilmember Berry, for spending time with us today. And also I'd like to thank the staff of the Arundecourt Library for the great hospitality that they have extended to us today. If you'd like to find out more about Kevin's platform, please go to the website at unitedpenfield.org, correct? And please check out our show notes for more information on today's show. I want to thank you for joining us today. This is On the Go with the Glenn Advantage team, and I am your host, once again, Marcia Glenn. And please let the Glenn Advantage be your advantage in the marketplace. And if indeed you'd like to search for On the Go with the Glenn Advantage team, please look for it wherever you get your podcasts. Follow, like, and subscribe. And thank you very much for joining us today. And
Thank you.
you.